I want to talk about the difference between listening and comprehension. It came up recently in the comments where from time to time there'll be somebody who says, you repeat yourself too much. You should be better about that, not repeating yourself so often. And I just did it there, which is just the nature of these videos. I don't script them out. I'm just talking, off the dome, as they might say. And I don't really know where even this video is headed because I don't have a strong point to make other than I know there's a big difference between listening and comprehension, meaning that a lot of times in life, you might say something to somebody else and they'll hear the opposite of what you said. They won't retain the information and you end up having to repeat yourself anyways, which can be kind of frustrating, but that's just the nature of being a human being, I guess. When we're talking, communication breaks down all the time. People hear something else. They hear what they think you said, but not what you actually said. So I think in general, it's almost always best to write stuff down if it's important versus verbally communicate it. And I also think we live in a world where we're so divided for our auditory attention. Even this video you might be listening to while you're doing something else. And if someone else tries to tell you something while you're listening to this, or you're listening to some other podcast, or there's just content constantly swarming around you all the time, it's very easy to be distracted and only give half of your attention to what someone else might be saying. And yeah, you're listening, you're hearing what they're saying, but you're not really comprehending it. You're not retaining it. There's also the thing of, education where repetition is how we learn. And so oftentimes, if I'm repeating myself, it's because I really want it to sink in the point that I'm making. I'm probably doing it for two reasons. Because for one, again, the videos aren't scripted, so I'm just kind of saying what's coming to mind in the moment. But I also want you to understand that the point I'm making is important and should be retained more than something else. Oftentimes people will hear what they want to hear and think you said. And you see this far too frequently when people will respond back, oh, so what you're saying is this. And you say, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. So if I tend to repeat myself, it's probably because I'm trying to maybe say the same thing a different way. So you get that perspective, the audio perspective on it. Oftentimes you take a picture of something from one perspective and it looks a certain way. If you take a picture of the same thing from a different angle, it gives you new perspective. So repeating the same thing, hearing the same thing twice can be effective in that regard. And it can also just be a tactic used by a lot of presenters and teachers, saying the same thing over and over again. So even if you're only catching bits and pieces of it, added together, it adds up to more than any one thing. Because there's many times where I've made videos and I've been talking about something and someone goes to the comments, they ask me a question and I've already said it in the video. They either just didn't get to it or they weren't listening. And another frustrating thing about life and people is oftentimes you might be talking or, maybe whoever it is, whoever's having the conversation, and the other person's like, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I totally get it. And you're like, oh, okay, I guess they got it. And sure enough, they didn't get it. They do the opposite or they do something different or they clearly weren't paying attention. We're just flawed as human beings. And unfortunately, I don't know a solution to it other than, I could try and not repeat myself from time to time. I'm certainly not trying to just say the same thing over and over and over again. But also, I think people can do a better job listening. I certainly can, because there's plenty of times where I'm distracted, I'm not paying attention, I'm half listening, and I'm not retaining, I'm not comprehending. And I'm the type of person that appreciates reminders. I appreciate when people just confirm, just check in, make sure, because the last thing you want to happen is for something to be missed over something as simple as like, oh, I didn't remember, or I didn't hear you, oh, that's what you wanted. So that constant check-in, the constant reminders can keep things on track and can be safe, just a good way to communicate, to ensure that things actually get done, especially if it's something important. Like when it comes to production, the location, the call time, I usually verbally tell the person as well as send them some kind of text documentation, whether it's a literal text or an email or some kind of written documented notice of what it is that's the most important. Here's the address, here's the call time. Other things that might be important to document are the deliverables. Here's what I expect you to make out of all this. Don't just tell that to somebody. You should, and I think it is beneficial to do both. oftentimes, almost for every project I've ever done, I have a verbal conversation with the person who's working on it, as well as text documentation saying, okay, here are the things that I want you to do. And chances are there's something that I said that they're going to miss that's going to be reaffirmed in the text. But if there's something in the text that's confusing, they have that verbal conversation to cross-reference, because that is the unfortunate part of text. It can be shorthand, it can be quick, and it's very efficient. And obviously you can look over it, you can read it as many times as you want. So someone can, repeat it to themselves if they're like, wait, what was it? Was I supposed to lock the doors or was I not supposed to lock the door? Oh, it says don't lock the doors. Okay, it's written right there. I know what that says. But there's other times where text can be very open to interpretation. It can be vague. It can be, what do you mean when you say X, Y, or Z? And oftentimes verbally, we're able to express both with our body language physically, as well as our tone, our intonation, something that's a little bit more meaningful than the words alone. So doing both is vital, I think, for any effective communication. The other thing that comes to mind is visual guides and aids when we're talking about all of this. One of the most effective things that I've found over the years in meetings is to have a whiteboard going all the time, a visual cue for what it is we're all talking about. Oftentimes when we're listening, we're hearing, we're all picturing something a little bit different in our brains. And once those dots start to connect internally with ourselves, we can quickly get off the same page as everybody else. Everyone has their own little idea in their head of what it is that they're envisioning. And the moment you put a whiteboard in play and you start sketching things out, giving that visual foundation to the conversation, it saves you so much time, effort, and energy in the long run, because now everyone is literally on the same page or the same whiteboard. It could be a chalkboard, I don't care. It could be paper, the old school, like tear off the giant sheets of paper. Doesn't really matter. But if you're having any type of collaborative brainstorm, meeting, or session, there's something very valuable about having a physical whiteboard that everyone can be looking at as a kind of mile marker, as a cornerstone of the conversation. And this is something that is becoming far harder to do because everything's virtual nowadays. Everyone's having meetings on Zoom or Skype or Teams, or we're having phone calls where, again, the competition for that auditory attention is very high. There's lots of sounds and noises and things always filling the airwaves. And yet visually, it can be hard to all get on the same page when everything's virtual and you don't really know what someone's looking at. You don't have a physical manifestation in real life to all be on the same page. So it's a challenge, but one that I welcome and one that I think everyone can face in small, easy ways. Something as simple as writing on a whiteboard. It doesn't take much, but it can have a huge impact in terms of comprehension, retention, and just everyone feeling like they understand what the project is all about. Because again, listening is very rarely ever enough. It can be good for, storytelling over dinner, catching friends up on a conversation, recounting something that happened, what's going on with life updates. But if there's important information, facts, figures, numbers, deliverables, write it down. And if it's a group effort, put it on a whiteboard so you know that everybody's looking at the same stuff and there's no room for misinterpretation. I think that's pretty much kind of the main points. It's having a few check-ins on what it is we're talking about. And then they're just having grace and understanding that people forget things. I certainly am guilty of that. I forget plenty and then have to be reminded, oh yeah, oops, alarms, reminders, all those things are very helpful. But beyond that, if you have any ideas of your own, like how do you handle communication? Do you have any tips or tricks, easy, simple stuff that help fix some of the broken nature of humanity and people in general? We live in a world where we're all very busy, we're all very distracted, and yet we still have roles, responsibilities that need to be fulfilled. So if you have any tricks or tips, please let me know in the comments. Maybe it's something I can use or someone else can benefit from.